All right, so you've probably heard about this Wayne Jenkins guy,
Oh,
the
yeah.
Baltimore cop who went from like super cop to, a convicted criminal.
Right,
But trust me, there's way more to this story than just the
right. Oh,
headlines.
yeah, absolutely.
Today, we are going deep,
Okay.
deep into the world of police corruption in Baltimore.
All right.
And we're going to uncover how a system that was designed to fight crime
Mm-hmm.
actually became a breeding ground for it.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. You know how these external pressures can just totally shape the way police do things,
Hmm.
sometimes with consequences that nobody really intended.
Right.
Think about it. Baltimore in the early 2000s,
So-
high crime rates, a struggling economy.
Right.
The whole city is kind of on edge, and the politicians, they're desperate for solutions, right?
Right.
And that desperation, it really creates a climate where something like zero tolerance policing can just take root.
Okay, so I'm seeing the stage being set here, but what was the tipping point?
Yeah.
What made zero tolerance the go-to solution?
Well, you've got to remember the horrific firebombing of the Dawson family in 2002.
Oh, wow.
That was a huge turning point.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the public outcry this family is targeted. Their home is engulfed in flames.
Oh my gosh.
A child's bike outside is melted from the heat.
Wow.
This tragedy puts all this pressure on city leaders to do something, anything, and fast.
Oh man, that image is just seared into my mind.
Yeah.
That bike. It's clear why that would have such a profound impact on how the city approached crime.
Exactly. And then Mayor Martin O'Malley,
Mm-hmm.
he responds with a zero tolerance policy,
Right.
cracking down hard even on really minor offenses.
Wow.
I mean, the idea was to create this environment where criminals would think twice before doing anything.
Right.
Big or small, it didn't matter.
It's that broken windows theory,
Yeah.
right? If
Yeah.
you eliminate the small signs of disorder,
Yeah.
you can prevent the bigger crimes
Literally.
from happening.
You got it. But while the approach, it might have led to fewer crimes overall,
Right.
there were downsides,
Okay.
More police in a lot of communities often being very aggressive and targeted,
Hmm.
and that increased tension between the police and the people who live there,
Yeah.
especially in Baltimore's black neighborhoods.
Right.
So instead of building trust,
Yeah.
it fostered resentment and fear.
So we have got this pressure cooker environment.
Yeah.
Zero tolerance is in full swing.
Yep,
And that's where Wayne Jenkins enters the picture.
that's right.
What was it about Jenkins that made him stand out in this climate?
Well, Jenkins was young, ambitious ex-Marine
Okay.
and the perfect picture of this tough cop persona.
Mm-hmm.
He racked up arrests so fast,
Ah.
and he earned this reputation for being incredibly effective,
Okay.
almost superhuman,
Wow.
in his ability to just find crime.
I bet there's some wild stories about his early days on the force.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of impact did he have on the other officers?
He was a legend,
Wow.
someone to emulate. There are stories of younger officers hiding their own small drug busts,
Oh, really?
afraid that they'd look bad compared to Jenkins.
Wow.
He just embodied success in a system that prioritized arrests and convictions above everything else.
So it sounds like the perfect storm, a system that incentivized aggressive tactics
Yeah.
and an officer who thrived in that environment.
Yeah.
But you mentioned red flags earlier.
Right.
Were there any early warning signs that Jenkins might be crossing a line?
Oh, yeah, there were definitely signs.
Like what?
Well, one that comes to mind is the case of George Sneed.
Okay.
Jenkins and his partner claim Sneed had been throwing bottles at them when they arrested him,
Okay.
which they said resulted in Sneed getting a broken jaw.
Oh, wow.
But security footage later showed that Sneed was just watching the arrest from a distance and never actually did anything violent.
Hold on. So Jenkins and his partner lied in their report.
Yeah.
What happened when the video came out?
Well, despite the video evidence contradicting their claims, both officers were cleared of any wrongdoing.
Are you serious?
Their personnel files were spotless.
Wow.
And get this, within a year, both of them got promotions.
No way.
Yeah, it really highlights the lack of accountability in the Baltimore PD at the time.
It's unbelievable. It almost sounds like they were turning a blind eye to misconduct,
Yeah.
especially if you were getting the results they wanted.
It was a dangerous combination, a
Yeah.
culture of impunity
Right.
and a system that rewarded officers for making arrests no matter what.
Right.
And things were about to shift again in the department,
Or
creating even more opportunities for abuse.
now I'm intrigued.
Yeah,
New mayor, new approach,
right?
and Wayne Jenkins is right there in the thick of it.
Yep.
Tell me more about this shift.
Well, Sheila Dixon became mayor in 2007.
Okay.
and she knew about the problems with zero tolerance.
Right.
Her focus was on reducing violent crime,
Okay.
but she wanted to do it in a way that could actually, rebuild trust with the community.
Right.
So instead of just focusing on every little offense,
Mhm.
the emphasis shifted to targeting repeat offenders and serious crimes.
So less about the quantity of arrests and more about quality.
Exactly. And to do this, the Baltimore PD created these specialized plainclothes task forces.
Okay.
These units had a lot of autonomy and discretion,
Yeah.
giving officers like Jenkins even more freedom to operate kind of in the shadows.
So more freedom, less oversight.
Right.
And we've already seen that Jenkins wasn't shy about pushing the limits.
Uh-huh.
I feel like this is where things get really messy.
You're right to be concerned because with these plainclothes units, we start to see the darker side of Jenkins's ambition
Okay.
really emerge.
Right.
A good example of this is the case of Umar Burley.
This is where we really see the human cost, right?
Yes.
Real people being affected by these questionable tactics.
Absolutely. Imagine you're Umar Burley driving your car in 2010,
Okay.
and all of a sudden you're being followed by these unmarked cars.
Oh, wow.
You think it's a robbery, right? So you speed off, leading to this high-speed chase that ends in a really bad car crash.
Wait, so Jenkins and his unit started this chase just on suspicion alone.
Yeah.
There was no evidence of a crime.
That's right. But it gets even worse.
Oh, no.
Because after the crash, Jenkins claims he found heroin in Burley's car. Burley insists that the drugs were planted.
Right.
But because of his past,
Yeah.
his word means nothing against this decorated officer.
It's he said, she said, but the power dynamic is so out of whack.
It is.
How could anybody challenge the word of a super cop?
Exactly. Burley can't afford a good lawyer.
Right.
He's facing overwhelming odds, so he takes a plea deal even though he says he's innocent.
Wow.
Jenkins escapes any scrutiny,
Man.
and it just reinforces his belief that he can do whatever he wants.
So it seems like he was getting away with bolder and bolder actions.
Mm.
But was anyone noticing a pattern?
Well, there was one person who was starting to connect the dots.
Ooh.
A defense attorney named Ivan Bates. He started noticing these similarities in the stories his clients were telling about Jenkins.
Really?
One client, Jamal Walker, described being pulled over by Jenkins and his partner, illegally searched, and then having a bunch of cash stolen from him.
Stolen.
Yeah.
Not planted, but taken.
Gone.
Wow, this is a whole other level.
It is. Walker even said that while Jenkins was taking the money, he kept saying, "I'm not cruddy."
I'm not cruddy. What does that even mean?
It's Baltimore slang for a dirty cop.
Oh, wow.
Even while he's allegedly stealing money, Jenkins is trying to keep up this appearance of, righteousness.
It's crazy.
And what makes Walker's case so important is that unlike Burley,
Yeah.
he had evidence.
Oh, really?
He had an alarm log from his home security system,
Okay.
and it contradicted what the officers said about when they were at his house.
So Walker actually had a chance
Yeah.
to challenge Jenkins's version of what happened.
Yes, and because of cases like Walker's,
Mm-hmm.
Bates started to think there was something bigger going on. He realized that he'd found this pattern of behavior that suggested that what Jenkins was doing wasn't just some isolated thing,
Right.
but part of something much bigger and way more disturbing.
And this is all happening while he's still being celebrated as a super cop.
Yep.
It's mind-blowing.
It really shows how easily systems can be manipulated,
Yeah,
especially when those in power want to keep things the way they are.
right.
But even though there wasn't much internal accountability,
Yeah,
people outside the Baltimore PD were starting to notice what Jenkins was doing,
okay.
and that's when things take an even darker turn.
I can't wait to hear what happens next. This is
Wonderful.
getting intense.
Oh, yeah. Just wait.
Okay, so we're back, and things are getting seriously shady. Last time we were talking about Wayne Jenkins building his super cop reputation, racking up arrests, but also engaging in some seriously questionable behavior.
Right.
And defense attorney Ivan Bates is starting to notice a pattern. But at this point, Jenkins is feeling pretty untouchable.
Yeah, that feeling of being untouchable, it's a big part of how corruption takes root.
Right. And Jenkins was fueled by this ambition, this warped sense of justice.
Yeah.
And he was about to take things to a whole other level.
Okay.
Remember, he was seizing tons of drugs,
Yeah.
and he realized he could make a lot of money off of them.
Oh, wow.
But he needed someone outside the police department to help him sell them.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Who did he choose?
He picked Donald Stepp, a longtime family friend.
Okay.
And get this, a convicted drug dealer.
Wait, he teams up with a criminal?
Yeah.
I mean, Jenkins was bold,
Right.
but that seems incredibly risky.
It might seem counterintuitive, but it actually kind of makes sense.
Okay.
Stepp already knew the drug trade. He had connections.
Right.
And most importantly, Jenkins thought he could control him.
So it was a calculated risk based on their history and this messed up sense of trust.
Exactly.
How did this partnership even start?
It started really casually.
Oh, really?
Jenkins and Stepp had become friends through Jenkins Brothers poker nights.
Okay. And get this. A bunch of police officers played in these games regularly.
Wow.
And during a casino trip to Delaware, Jenkins just kind of offhand mentioned to Stepp that he might have something for him.
So no pressure, just a casual offer for some easy money?
Pretty much. And Stepp was struggling financially at the time.
Okay.
He was hesitant at first,
Right.
but Jenkins was really good at manipulating people.
Mm.
He played up the low risk, saying they were basically untouchable because they had connections to law enforcement.
That's where that culture of impunity we talked about earlier really comes into play.
Exactly. It wasn't just looking the other way. It
Yeah.
was this genuine belief that they were above the law.
Wow.
For Stepp, the money was tempting,
Right.
and he thought it was safe because he was working with a cop.
It's crazy how that works.
It is.
So Jenkins had his inside man,
Right.
his connection to the drug trade.
Yep.
What did this partnership look like in action?
Well, Jenkins got bolder.
Okay.
He started stealing more and more drugs. From dealers, he was robbing them.
He was robbing drug dealers.
Yeah, and he'd say it was a way to go after bigger targets.
Wow.
He'd even stage these fake busts using Stepp to plant drugs on people.
This isn't just bending the rules anymore.
Yeah.
This is serious criminal activity.
It is.
It's unbelievable that he was still seen as a super cop while this was happening.
He was really good at covering his tracks,
Yeah.
both with the real police work and the criminal stuff.
Right.
And he had this group of loyal cops around him. Some were in on it, and some just looked the other way.
It's scary to think about this group of cops operating like a gang.
It is.
Were there any close calls?
There were some red flags.
Like what?
Well, one time, a drug dealer who Jenkins had robbed filed a complaint.
Okay.
But Jenkins used his connections in the department to discredit the dealer and shut the whole thing down.
So he used the system that was supposed to hold him accountable as a shield.
Exactly. It's chilling how power can be used for such bad things when there are no checks and balances.
It really is.
Yeah.
But even though he was good at avoiding getting caught,
Mm-hmm.
there were things happening that would lead to his downfall.
Yeah.
You're talking about the unrest after Freddie Gray died in police custody, right?
Yes. In 2015, Baltimore became the center of this national conversation about police brutality and racism.
Right.
And the FBI was under a ton of pressure to address the corruption in the Baltimore PD.
Yeah.
So they launched a full investigation.
It's kind of ironic that Jenkins was doing all this at the same time that police were under so much scrutiny.
It is, and it shows that even in really dark times,
Yeah,
there are people fighting for justice.
absolutely.
And it was this investigation fueled by people demanding change
Yeah.
that finally brought Jenkins down.
Okay, I'm hooked. How did they finally catch him?
They started by talking to low-level criminals,
Okay.
informants, who would give them information to avoid going to jail.
Right.
And these people gave details about how Jenkins operated his network and the extent of his drug operation.
So the people on the fringes of his world brought him down.
It's classic.
Yeah.
Even the most complicated criminal schemes can be ruined by the people closest to them.
Right.
As the FBI got more evidence,
Yeah.
they started going after people higher up in Jenkins' circle,
Okay.
including Stepp.
Stepp, the drug dealer turned police informant.
Yeah.
What happened when the FBI approached him?
He was facing a long prison sentence.
Right.
So he agreed to cooperate.
Of course.
And he gave them crucial information that backed up the evidence they already had against Jenkins.
Wow.
He was the key to the whole case.
This is where it all falls apart for Jenkins.
Uh-huh.
His trusted accomplice turns on him.
Yep, a classic betrayal.
And it wasn't just Stepp, right?
Right? Other officers got scared and started talking too.
Wow.
They revealed just how corrupt the department was.
What did they have?
The FBI had wiretap surveillance and tons of evidence.
What was Jenkins's reaction?
He was defiant.
Really?
He denied everything.
Even when they had all that evidence.
Even then, he still thought he was above the law.
The super cop who could do no wrong.
It's kind of sad.
It is.
He was blinded by his ambition,
Yeah.
his twisted sense of justice.
Right.
He just didn't get how bad his actions were. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when people have power with no oversight, and how a system that cares more about results than doing things the right way can create these kinds of monsters.
Right.
But even though Jenkins kept denying everything, the truth was going to come out.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the Wayne Jenkins story and police corruption in Baltimore. It's been quite a journey, right? From zero tolerance to those plainclothes units, from petty theft to full-blown drug dealing.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
And Jenkins is building his super cop reputation the whole time while he's running this criminal enterprise behind the scenes.
It's amazing how he was able to manipulate the system for so long. He was so good at playing the game, making friends in the right places, and silencing anyone who questioned him.
But as we all know, the truth always has a way of coming out. That's for sure.
And the truth was a bombshell. In 2017, Jenkins and 6 other cops from his gun trace task force were arrested by the FBI.
Wow.
Racketeering, robbery, extortion, drug dealing. The charges were huge, and everyone was shocked.
I bet.
What was the reaction like in Baltimore?
Oh, it was a total mess. People felt betrayed.
Yeah,
I mean, this wasn't just one bad cop.
right.
This was a whole unit who were supposed to be tackling the worst crimes in the city.
Yeah.
And they were operating like a gang.
It's crazy.
It destroyed any trust people had in the police.
I can only imagine. The trial must have been a media circus.
Oh, yeah, it was huge.
What were some of the biggest things that came out during the trial?
Oh, man. There was so much. Witnesses talked about Jenkins and his crew robbing drug dealers, planting evidence, even selling the drugs they took.
Wow.
It really showed how deep the corruption went
Hmm.
and how messed up the system was that allowed it to happen.
What about the police department itself? Did they take any responsibility, or was it still that blue wall of silence? Well, it was a mixed bag. Some officers were really disturbed by what they heard,
Right.
while others stayed quiet to protect themselves.
Of course.
But things were starting to change. People were realizing that the department needed a major overhaul.
What about Jenkins? Did he ever admit to what he did? Did he show any remorse?
No, not really. Throughout the trial, Jenkins kept saying he was innocent.
Seriously.
He said he was a victim of circumstance, but there was just too much evidence against him.
So what was the verdict?
Jenkins was found guilty on all charges,
Wow.
and he was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison.
That's a long time.
It is.
It was a big case.
It was.
It sent a message that police corruption would not be tolerated.
Yeah, but 25 years doesn't really make up for all the damage he caused.
Of course not. What about the people he hurt? People like Umar Burley, who went to prison because of Jenkins's lies.
The impact was huge. Dozens of cases that Jenkins and his unit worked on were reviewed,
Wow.
convictions were overturned, and a lot of people who were wrongly imprisoned were set free.
That's amazing.
The city had to pay millions of dollars in settlements from lawsuits.
Wow.
It's a long and expensive process trying to fix the damage and rebuild trust with the community.
It is.
Hmm?
But what about the bigger picture? Has the Baltimore PD actually changed, or are the problems still there?
Well, reform takes time.
Mhm.
The Baltimore PD made some changes, body cameras, stricter policies about using force, more accountability.
Okay.
There's a bigger focus now on community policing, building relationships with the people they serve.
Right. But real change is more than just changing the rules.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about changing attitudes and the whole culture of the department.
Exact.
Getting rid of those old habits and biases takes time and effort.
Yeah.
It's tough, but there are signs that things are getting better.
Like what?
New leadership, a willingness to admit they made mistakes,
Right.
and a real effort to find solutions that work.
So this story about Wayne Jenkins and the Gun Trace Task Force is a really dark chapter in Baltimore's history.
Yeah, it is.
But it also sparks some important changes. It reminds us that even when things seem really bad,
Yeah.
there's always hope for a brighter future.
I think the biggest thing to learn from this case is the importance of accountability. We need to hold people in power, especially law enforcement, to the highest possible standards.
Absolutely.
It means demanding transparency, questioning the stories we're told, and fighting for justice.
And remembering that even in a system as complicated and flawed as the criminal justice system change is possible.
Yeah.
It takes everyone being vigilant, having the courage to speak up, and working together to build a society that's more just and fair.
Well said. The story of Wayne Jenkins reminds us that nobody is above the law, and we all have a responsibility to hold those in power accountable. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a fascinating one.